Hi, all, and welcome back. Today we have landing your first job with Jennifer Baker, who's an alum of Hopkins, and I'm very excited to introduce her. So welcome, Jennifer, to today's session.
Thank you so much for the introduction, and it's wonderful to be here with you all virtually. My name is Jennifer. I graduated in May of 2020 with my Master's of Public Health and am a public health practitioner who's really passionate about enhancing quality of life and well-being across the life course, but particularly among older adults, and excited for this opportunity to connect with you all today about the strategies and tools and techniques that I use to help to land a job, and hope that they end up being helpful for you as well. I currently serve as a senior policy aide for Senator Bob Casey, who is the chairman of the Senate Special Committee on Aging, and every day have the opportunity to flex some of the skills and lessons learned from my MPH in my work. And so I'm excited, like I said, to share about that with you all today.
Great, thanks so much. As an alum as well, it's just so fun to see our alum doing such amazing work out there in the community, and that's so vital. And over the course of these last couple of weeks, we've heard many experts speak and how varied public health is. And so thank you also for sharing a voice in the policy sector. And so with that, this is going to be very conversational. I'm just going to ask you a series of questions, and feel free to just provide as much information as you can. So first question is, if you can tell us about yourself and your transition into your first public health job. So you just told us a little bit, but if you could expand a little bit more into getting that first public health job, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as I was reflecting on this presentation and opportunity to connect with you all, I thought a lot about just the role that community has played in helping me to land public health roles that advance causes that I care about. And so my first job in public health, I was able to reach out to folks that had shared interests with me surrounding aging issues, and really to build community with them and relationships. And then when a job opportunity became available, one of those people served on the board of said organization that I was looking at, and so was able to put in a good word because I had done sort of the work ahead of time to build an authentic relationship to then land my first job. And so my first job was actually as a rural outreach coordinator for the Alzheimer's Association based in Reno, Nevada, so on the other side of the country, and was, I think, very much a public health job. But as is often the case with aging issues, it falls into sort of these silos, and there was a lot of work to be done about really advocating for aging and Alzheimer's and a host of things to be considered as public health issues, and ones that require intervention and support. And so, but my first job and all of my jobs have really come to the table because of relationships, and then maintaining those relationships and delivering on on the responsibilities at hand. But I think maintaining and building upon relationships led to that first job.
Fantastic. I'm going to go off script just a little bit here because you're now working in DC, correct?
I am indeed.
So that job was in Reno, Nevada. Were you from Reno? I'm just always so interested to see how people move about in positions.
No, yeah, I was not from Reno, the biggest little city. I had finished doing an international fellowship looking at Alzheimer's and dementia care as part of my undergrad. When I graduated, I received a fellowship and felt like I had a decent global perspective, or at least the inklings of a global perspective. Still lots of room for growth and understanding, and really wanted to have a better sense of how folks navigate through a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or a related form of dementia in rural communities. I think sometimes rural communities actually can have a stronger sense of community and can look out for each other in different ways than you might see in bigger cities, but that there might be a dearth of resources. And so I wanted to sort of explore that, and so served as the rural outreach coordinator and did support groups and education classes all throughout what out west is in Reno or the surrounding area. They have frontier counties, so counties that are beyond rural. And it was wonderful. I loved that experience and eventually transitioned over to the university to sort of broaden the scope of approach that I took to the University of Nevada to enhance quality of life and well-being among older adults, and loved the work I was doing, though I was leading federal programs and saw the impact of policy on what folks on the ground were able to do. And so that inspired me to put my chips on the table and see where they landed. And I ended up landing at Hopkins. And so, drove across the country and did my MPH in Baltimore, and then have since transitioned up to DC. So yeah, one of these, they're not like the other, I was just back out west and hanging in the mountains. We don't have those as much out here, but we have lots of other things.
Yeah, absolutely. So fun. So again, a little off script, but did your first policy class as a cohort group just blow you away at Hopkins when you joined the MPH program?
Yeah, absolutely. It was amazing. And I was with Dr. Sharfstein, and just so many of the lessons learned there I have kept with me. In fact, in one of the questions that's up ahead comes from that class. So a recommendation I might have.
How fun. I hear the same thing, for many of us that worked in like the private sector and worked on a small scale. And then we have that aha moment that if we really want to change on a large level, public health, it really has to come down to policy. So good on you for moving into that sphere. So thank you. All right, so let's get you to the next question. And that's, what skills or knowledge did you learn throughout the MPH program that you find most useful in your career? And this isn't an or, this is definitely an and. So skills and knowledge that I'm sure you're applying in your career.
Yeah, I think, back to that public health policy class, one of the assignments was to do your elevator pitch. So in a couple of minutes, help to convince somebody about the issue that you care about. And I think that is a strategy that is just beyond helpful in every setting I've engaged in, is just being able to, at the top, here's the elevator pitch. Here is why we are here. Let's orient to this. And so I think that's been just tremendously helpful, and something that I help to encourage different fellows that work with us, or graduate interns, to also work on, is that elevator pitch. I think the other thing is using data to tell a story. I think I took a number of classes on health communications, and I work as what we call ourselves. We call ourselves the storytelling committee, and are always seeking ways to personalize the data, but to use the data to drive change. And so I think that's a skill. I mean, it comes up honestly every day, where we're thinking about how do we help to advance change in an evidence-informed way, or evidence-based wherever we can. And I think it's about personalizing the data. It's about, and that actually kind of goes into your elevator pitch too. It's, who are you talking to? What are the, what are the things that drive them, and tailoring that pitch to the person that you're talking to. But be it in policy or programs or whatever under the sun with public health. But I think just being able to tailor the data and to share about it in a way that resonates with your audience, I think is really helpful. And so I think those are two things that I think about daily, and it will stick with me forever.
Any chance you took any GIS courses while you were in the MPH program, talking about showing your data in a format to tell a story?
I did not. I think, part of my MPH program and living in general is recognizing my strengths and some of my weaknesses. GIS probably falls into a weaknesses category. And I think that's where also, building out teams, I'll say that's another thing that I learned throughout my program is there are people whose brains just work in data in ways that mine absolutely never could. And mine works in program development and policy in ways that, sometimes data folks' brains won't. Oftentimes you often find people who can work at the middle of that too. But it's about building teams that complement each other, and who can also, help with the data and the visualization of that data. And I'm grateful to be able to rely on lots of folks to help with some of that. So, but no, I didn't take a GIS class.
Well, you keep circling back to what I love you initially said about building community. So that's what building teams is building a community to work together in solving a problem. So great advice. Thank you, Jennifer. All right. So the third question is, what strategies did you apply when searching for a post-graduation position? And if you could tell us what worked and what didn't work for you. And in fact, in my family, we always do a worst and best around the dinner table. So I'm going to flip that. So if you could tell us what didn't work, and then we'll end on the positive of what did work for you.
Yeah, I would provide a brief caveat to my answer to just say that I graduated at really the start of the pandemic. And so it was a pretty interesting time to be finding a job, and one that I think actually strengthens the argument for what I'm about to say. When I started my and so I'm going to flip it, back to answering what worked. And then what didn't work was the pandemic. The pandemic was not helpful. It got in the way of all sorts of good things. And also, hopefully we don't have another pandemic that shuts things down, but life is fluid, and things change. And so I think one of the things that I did immediately upon moving out east was recognize that I didn't really have community out east, that most of my community was based on the West Coast and in other places across the globe. And so I spent a lot of time looking up folks that were doing things that aligned with my interest areas in Baltimore or in DC, knowing that those were both places I was interested in and living in, and particularly living in DC. But I reached out to those folks and never underestimated the value of a student email address, especially one from Johns Hopkins. I do think that carries a lot of weight. I probably would send out 10 emails and get one response back. But if I got that one response, I hopped on the MARC train and came in and met with folks in person if I could, or, when things shifted to virtual, started to do that virtually. But I also attended every event that I could that was aligned with my interest areas and passions, just as an opportunity to get to know people, um, and to brainstorm about possible pathways with them. Through doing that, there was an event on grandparents raising grandchildren, which is a sort of a niche topic, but one that is aligns with a lot of public health issues and considerations. And there was a report released at the Senate, not being from this area. I was like, oh my gosh, I can go to the Senate and hear about grandparents and learn about this topic area that I'm interested in. And I had actually just written a policy paper for Dr. Sharfstein's class about transportation, and I had directed it to then the ranking member of the Aging Committee. And his staff member actually ended up being at this event that I went to. And so I talked to her, and I ended up doing my practicum with the committee that I now work for in a full-time capacity. But I just took every opportunity that I could to build relationships with people. And then when I then graduated at a time where overnight, jobs that I was a finalist for disappeared. It was those relationships and that sense of community that sustained me through some challenges and enabled me to remain discerning about what my next steps might be. And so I think my best advice in a long-winded sort of way here is it's just January. Use the time that you have to meet as many people as you can in an intentional manner, and then continue to reach back out to them. I think that intentionality piece is really important, though, about going with, a purpose, a reason to meet with them, be it their research interest or their experience in a program or whatever else.
Would you include being intentional and also when you're saying, it's only January now, but in meeting as many of their colleague classmates as they can prior to May?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that's, it's one of the coolest things about getting my master's was meeting folks with just such a range of interests, I think I was the only one one of the only people who focused on aging. And so it was so great to then, learn about somebody's interest in malaria or, really everything under the sun, and to think, and just to build those relationships. In fact, I live currently in DC with one of my friends from my master's program, and see folks from the MPH here often. And so I think, taking advantage of the time that you have to be a student and to be together and to build relationships there is so important. Even if it doesn't lead to necessarily a job, it's the more you can build out a network of public health professionals and friends, and support each other, in an environment that can be fraught. It's I think really helpful and validating. I know I'm seeking validation and give validation to a number of my public health colleagues and friends now as well.
That's wonderful. So back in my day, again, dating myself, and I was an older student when I entered into the program in 2007, 2008, Facebook just came on the scene. And I know it's passé among your age group, but that's the way in which I was able to connect and maintain friendships since 2008 in my program. I mean, to this day, I still have wonderful friends all over the globe due to that connection. How is it, again, I'm a little off script here, but you're prompting all of these thoughts in my head. How is it that you're maintaining those friendships, out intentionally? Is there another platform like Facebook or something like that you're using to keep in touch with some of your global MPH colleagues?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's always room for growth, I think, from my perspective, and how I can better keep in touch with folks and maintain relationships. But I I do think social media can be a helpful platform for that, for more informally engaging. And then when you see something big is happening, to be able to then, reach out. We also, used WhatsApp, and still have a WhatsApp chat. I messaged with some of the more international students, who have moved back to to different places. I will message them, using WhatsApp. I think LinkedIn is, I don't love LinkedIn, I will say. There are benefits to it. And it can be helpful for seeing, like, it'll pop up of like, this person moved to DC. And it's like, oh, great. Like, we had a class together. They seemed really great. And I'll reach out and, we can grab a coffee or something along those lines. So a combination of factors.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's move on to question 4. And that is, please share any interviewing techniques that you utilized to prepare for interviews, either in person or virtual. And you had already said that the pandemic hit. So were you then made to do some Zoom type interviews rather than
Oh my
the
gosh,
in-person?
so many. Yeah, again, I was trying to be very intentional and discerning about what my next step was. And so that meant I engaged in lots of interviews. And I think, a piece of it that I always found comforting going into it was just feeling like, this is a conversation. I'm interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing me. And it's about making sure it's a good fit for both of us. And so I think that sort of, I think it's a little bit of a confidence, when you're going into an interview as a helpful baseline. I also, I will flip it to say, like, I'm back on the other side of things in terms of interviewing people. And I'll be surprised by how often I interview with folks who don't really know anything about the committee or the senator that I work for. And I think one of the things that I always found to be helpful was to spend a decent amount of time on the websites of the jobs that I was applying for, and making sure that I had a good understanding of, their mission and their vision and how I might be able to contribute to that. And would always make sure to orient my questions surrounding that, and choose, to apply for jobs that I felt like I would align with their mission and vision. So I wasn't trying to, apply for things that didn't fit that bucket. But I do think that was just very helpful in terms of doing some of that due diligence. For virtual, certainly I think things have gotten a little bit easier now, but I would always try to make sure I logged on 15 minutes early if I could, knowing that the virtual platforms were all very different, and some worked better than others on my phone or on my computer. And then in-person interviews, I think if you have the option, if somebody gives you the option to do in-person or virtual, I think, in-person interviews just give you a much better sense of who you might be working with in different ways. You see people's mannerisms in different ways. It's easier to respond. And so, but I think, the advice is really to just do your homework in advance. The other space that I would share, or piece that I would share, is, I was sending out a lot of different resumes and CVs for different potential opportunities, and doing that while, like you, taking, multiple different classes and doing a practicum and working on my capstone and trying to find time to build meaningful relationships with people. And so maybe I wasn't always as intentional about personalizing my cover letter. And I think a cover letter is just such a critical piece of getting your foot in the door. And so is your resume, but making sure that it's free of errors and that the date is correct, and that, that you find a space to highlight how, your experience aligns with their mission or will help them to advance their mission, or whatever else. I think just that little tweaking that you can do to a cover letter goes a long way. And so I just strongly encourage not using a stock cover letter when you're reaching out for jobs. In the field that I have played in, I think there are different guidance points for different roles, but I think that certainly has been true in policy advocacy sorts of roles.
That's all great advice, and it really mirrors much of what Paul had talked about in writing cover letters and elevator pitches. And
Yep.
So much of what you're saying is questions that students had directly had. So thank you for addressing that. What was my other question that I had for you on that? Oh, you had mentioned about, again, a little off script, mentioned about questions that you asked when you were being interviewed. What are some questions that you're thinking? Because, I've seen people as well. They will answer the questions that they think will be asked. They do that well. And at the end, there's that golden opportunity, like you said, that you're also interviewing that company. And the question is, what questions do you have for us? And then it's, I don't have any. So what kind of advice would you say, or what did you kind of ask to get a feel of the culture of and the environment of the company?
Yeah, I think every interview is a little bit different. And I think in general, if it didn't come out in the conversation, I would ask, a question about what vision do they have for this position? Is there space for growth? If that's something that you're interested in. If it's a grant funded position, asking what their, how long that grant might be, and if you're expected to help to secure additional funding. I think I ask questions about workplace culture. And I have asked questions about what they will view as success within this role, just to try and get a sense of how much they've actually thought about the role that they've drafted, because I think that could be very telling too. Yeah, I think those are sort of the big ones. I think now, certainly I would also ask questions about like workplace flexibilities, how you handle, COVID protocols and that kind of thing as well. And I think interviews are a good space for that. Although I would maybe ask more of the practical questions in a second or third interview, and keep your first round interviews really focused on like what gets you excited about the position, or what you're like maybe concerned about. If you have in the back of your head, like maybe I won't take this because I don't know that I see a pathway for growth here. Then you ask a question about that, or that you've heard, maybe the organization has an interesting reputation. And so maybe asking a question about that. I think the other thing that I will say about reputation is, as you intentionally build out your network and your community, then ask them when you're a finalist for a position what the reputation of an organization or your boss might be. I think that's really can be just tremendously helpful in ensuring that you end up in a workplace environment where you thrive. And that's an important piece. And so relying on that network, I think is very helpful for navigating through.
Those are great points, and ones that have not been made during these sessions. So thank you. I really appreciate that. All right, so question 5, how did you build your professional network, and we talked a little bit about this already, and how you maintain those relationships, and did you leverage this when you were searching for positions?
Yeah, I shared when I moved here, I was very intentional about reaching out to different folks. And then after every meeting, I would ask or at the end of every meeting, I would ask, who else should I be meeting with? And that was really helpful for then, sort of a snowball approach to building community and a network of support and vice versa. And then I maintain those. There's always room for growth. I have a list of folks that I, would love to be reaching out to more consistently. But for folks that are here in DC, I, try to make sure that I go to grab coffee or, a drink after work or, invite them to different things. I certainly share if something's relevant to something that I think somebody would care about. If I know that they're working with students or with, or looking for jobs, I'll share, jobs with different people. So I try to, some are more heavier touches than others, but I generally try to connect, either via email or in person pretty consistently with some of the core folks that have helped me, navigate through some rough times. And I will say, finding a job sometimes can be really challenging, and finding the right job and saying no to what feels like the wrong job also can be challenging, even if it's the right decision for you. And so I felt sometimes embarrassed to go to my network to then ask for more support as I was continuing to be discerning about jobs in a not so great job market. And in hindsight, I wish I could tell myself to not be embarrassed and to just have gone with confidence. Easier said than done, and it was a weird time, but just offering that in case it resonates with any of you. And I also, I think in all of this, a guiding thing for me is life begins at the end of your comfort zone. Asking people for help is not always in my comfort zone. And so, searching for a job is certainly a lesson in getting out of comfort. And so I just would say there are highs and lows, and it's okay to experience some of those lows as you're looking for a job.
Well, I really love some of the points you made. As I mentioned to you before we started our session, is that I'm serving as the Alumni Career Fellow. I had been through the program, and now I have the great, it's magic, being able to advise current MPH students, and I'm always looking to connect them with Hopkins alum. And you mentioned something that I have them do each time. I say, this is not free. This warm handoff to this introduction to an MPH alum or a Hopkins alum. When you talk to them, what I want you to ask at the end are, who are two people within your network that I should reach out to, and what's the best means to do so? So this is so gratifying to hear you say that exact same thing of, who else should I be talking to? And so, and I don't know, maybe Jennifer, if you had a different experience, but again, going through the program, I found that everybody on those 9 floors, their whole push was to help us as public health newbies to thrive in the field and to get in that pipeline and push us further. Did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I will forever be grateful to the folks at Hopkins for that. And I think part of why I felt that way is because when I would reach out to different faculty members, it wasn't like, hey, help me get a job. It was a conversation about, their research or their practice, and how that aligned with mine, and questions that I had about different organizations or next steps. And so I think, again, just going back to like being intentional when you reach out to folks. And that way it's not, when you find yourself, applying for jobs, which could be now. I certainly was applying at this stage of the game when I was working on my MPH, and that way when you're reaching out to folks, it's it aligns with something that you've already talked about, and they know that it's a passion space of yours.
So the next question is up. So based on your experience, what would you look for if you were in the position to hire a graduate from Bloomberg?
Yeah, I think there are lots of things that I would look for. It depends on role in lots of cases, but I think a commitment to the mission, a willingness to, care about mission a little bit beyond self. I think is, so many of us, by nature of pursuing a master's degree in public health, we're service oriented. And so in hiring folks, very much look for folks who are service oriented, who are team oriented, who, despite the fact that I've been saying I quite a lot in this conversation, much to my chagrin, who use the term we more, so that you have a sense of are they collaborative? I look for folks that, build out teams of support. In this particular role, look for strong writers and folks who can clearly communicate about an issue, elevator pitches, and that feel comfortable on their feet, can improvise a little, but in the process of doing that, reflect the values and vision of, in this case, it's of the senator that I work for, but in others, it's, the center that I worked for. It's about making sure that you're hiring somebody that, is reflecting that vision and in the work that they're doing, working to build out the reputation of said organization.
Wonderful, thank you. So the next is, was there a setback that you faced with job searching that you later realized was an advantage? You did mention already that you went through a pandemic, and so was there any advantage to that or something else? And then how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I did indeed graduate during the pandemic, and that was like I said, I was a finalist for several different positions that overnight disappeared. And it was disappeared in we hope to be able to do this in a few months. And then obviously the pandemic didn't go away, hasn't gone away. And so I think that was certainly a setback. One of those positions that, in some ways I'm sure would have been really great. I then ended up having the opportunity to do some informal work with, and realized it wasn't a culture I would thrive in. And then was able to take more time and talk to my network of support and see is this just a me thing, or is this something a little bit broader? And so then when a permanent job came up, I said, no. And I wouldn't have been in that position if it weren't for, having this additional space That's one way of looking at it. And I'll call it like my limbo land sabbatical year. And so I'm grateful for that. And I think that's part of why my recommendation before you take a job is always to talk to your network, and just to have a sense of what you're getting into. Just because maybe somebody says, the culture isn't great, doesn't mean it's not still the right opportunity for you. It's just helpful to know what you might be going into. And then the other thing I will say is I was able to do a lot of independent freelance work, again, through those relationships that I built starting at the beginning of my MPH. So moved out here without a network of support on the East Coast, and really was able to work with a number of the folks that I'd connected with to be able to pick up some different jobs here and there. And it expanded my portfolio quite a bit. I was able to work on like a home and community-based services project in rural and tribal communities in New Mexico, and some different things. And so I think, the setbacks, provide opportunities for growth and learning about new things. And all that is to say that I am grateful to now have one consistent job that I really care about. And I'm grateful that I remained discerning in my time to get to.
I love all of that. It reminds me, I'm reflecting back to when Paul was talking, he said, when many of us get out of our MPH program, we just want a job, and that there's this buckshot approach that we just throw out our resume or CV to as many as possible. But your point is of that intentionality, and then taking that time to really be able to reflect on what it is that I want in my career and the contribution that I want to make. So I think that's just great advice. It reminds me of, I did much the same, every job. I was like, oh, I could do that. I could do that. I could do that. And I was like applying to everything. My cousin said these great words that I never forget: Jeanette, just because you can doesn't mean you have to.
Yep.
So, there's other people in the room. There's other people with a degree in public health. You don't have to take on every job, and that you can be intentional in your approach and what is also going to work for you. So I love that, Jennifer, that year gave you that space to be able to, really reflect.
There was certainly a lot of privilege that came with that. I recognize that I had was able to take that space. And I found, paying things to help me. But yes. And what I would say too is, if you're starting now in your search, then you have time to be discerning, because it's just middle of January. And so you have some time to feel things out a little bit. And so if I can be a resource in any way, knowing that my area of expertise is, or I wouldn't necessarily call it expertise, but the area that I play in is rather niche. But if it's, if I can be helpful, please let me know. I think that's the other thing here is just like, we're all in this together, and all of our powers combined. And so, to the extent that I can be helpful, please reach out.
That's lovely. Thank you. So here's a question on: what advice do you have for current students about solidifying an opportunity post-graduation?
Yeah, I think it aligns with all that we've talked about. Reach out now to organizations that you're interested in, even if there's not a job currently there. I think, fiscal years are different for every organization, it seems, certainly different than, in the federal government, than in state government, and whatever else. And so that impacts people's grants and ability to hire. And so reaching out to an organization, if you're like, gosh, this seems like a really cool spot. I'd love to work there. there are no jobs currently available, still reach out to the person who's currently doing something that you think seems interesting. And then you're on their radar when something becomes available, which oftentimes happens. So I would do that. I just can't stress enough how much I would recommend sending out those cold emails to people, or, to the extent that you have faculty members that you work with that have relationships with folks in an area that you're interested in, and you have a genuine relationship with those faculty members, to see if they might be able to help to foster a connection so that you can learn more about what somebody's doing. I just think, with a student email, you're able to have some really great conversations with people. It can open up a lot of doors. And I think a lot of folks have, everybody's been in your shoes of looking for a job. And so, there are a lot of folks that are wanting to pay that forward. And so reach out, use your email addresses. Connect with people where you can, and if it's possible for you to meet with them in person, or at least virtually with the video on, I would recommend that.
Great advice. Thank you so much. And that takes us down to our last 10 minutes of being able to spend time here with Jennifer, which has been so exceptional. So if you have a question, I'd ask you to please raise your hand or feel free to come off mute. You do have that ability, and you can ask a question to Jennifer. And I'll stop my share now too. I do love that in the chat, let me find it, that Carolyn had said, my desktop note to self, who else should I be meeting with? And life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So I love those tidbits of advice. That's great.
The offer also stands. So, if you have a question, please don't hesitate to reach out after this as well. Sometimes asking questions about a job hunt or search can be, pretty personal. And so please don't hesitate to reach out in different platforms as well.
Well, I do have a question if other students aren't asking at this point. So we always hear all the time that, well, this job is saying that it needs X amount years of experience.
Yeah, don't listen to that.
Okay, so that's my question to you. So how do you get a job in a field that says they want experience when you don't have experience? So if you could talk about that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of studies about like women being less likely to apply for those jobs that, seem like a reach than men. Apply for them. Approach your job hunt with confidence. You are, all exceptional people who are dedicating time right now to learn all about public health so that you can make a broader and more sustainable impact in your field. And so I hope as you're applying for jobs, you take that energy with you and know that even if you apply for that job that's a reach and you don't hear back from one, it's not a reason to not apply for the next one that's a reach. And sometimes the jobs, if you apply for jobs where it's a reach, if your background aligns with that organization, if they're interested in you, it might be that they reach out to you for then a more informal conversation about something else, or they're able to connect you in different ways. So, everything's an opportunity to connect with people if you look at it that way, I guess. But I just please apply for jobs that require a little bit more experience, while also knowing if you have never supervised anybody or had a budget before, you're probably not going to go from zero to managing a budget of $500 million, approach these things with reason and some humility, but also with confidence. I'll offer an example of that right now. I'm working with a Master's of Public Health student from GW, but we love all public health people. And she started as an intern, and then we transitioned her over to a fellow, just in thinking that that would be helpful for her as she's looking for next steps, and now is applying for jobs and getting interviews for jobs that are quite senior. And it's because she's, we've told her consistently, apply and then lean on your network. We will reach out on your behalf. We'll put in a good word. And so, I just think apply for jobs that are outside of your comfort zone, and then reach out to your network as you do so. So that they can flag it if they know anybody that's on the hiring committee.
Well, I am going to put you on the hot spot for one more reflection here. I know you feel a little cringy about it, but can you tell us what your greatest growth opportunity has been throughout your career?
What do you mean by growth?
Well, you define it. I mean, it could be something on a personal level, it could be professional, but what is something that you felt that since you've gotten into your career life that has developed in a way perhaps that you didn't even see it going to?
Yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about growth and trajectory, and I certainly never saw myself working for a U.S. senator. That was a surprise, and a good one, a very, very good one. I think in a previous role, had launched a transportation program with very little funding and a great team of people. And we served, about 200 older adults in our first year who, otherwise were homebound. And it was a great program that operated on a shoestring budget with lots of passion and support from students and Masters of Social Work and public health students that helped as part of their practicums. And the other day I went back to Nevada, and I met with the director of the center that I used to work for, and he shared that through American Rescue Plan dollars, which are federal dollars that were written in part because of contributions from my boss and from me and people like me, there was funding for older adult transportation, and they were able to purchase a vehicle to now offer accessible transportation to older adults. And so I think about growth in terms of impact, and it's great to be able to see how things that you have done in the past can align with your future, and I don't know. I don't know if that's a very good answer, but I think about growth in terms of impact, and it's hard sometimes to feel like you're making an impact on Capitol Hill, and so that sort of story helps to remind me of, okay, like even when it doesn't feel like we're moving the needle enough, there's impact being made.
Well, I will say, as someone who's worked on a transportation issue in a rural county for the last almost 2 years, congratulations. That is a huge accomplishment and impact. So I'd like to say thank you so very much, Jennifer, for spending the time with us today. This has been an exceptional conversation, and I will again stress the point that you made to please make sure that you feel free to reach out to Jennifer. Again, and to Paul and Olivia and myself, I want to thank Olivia for making this possible with having Jennifer here today. So with that, I would say thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you all. Have a great one and stay dry out there. It's a little rainy up here, so or down here. So, all right. Bye.
It is indeed. Bye-bye. Thanks so much.